Hi, everybody. Welcome to this Q&A and Klaz Experience. We're here with Jude Salazar, and she is a friend that I have met through Natasha Galano. Shout out to Natasha. And she's somebody that books commercials left and right. So I wanted to pick her brain and get any insight that she may have. So welcome, Jude.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm so happy you're here. We were just talking and you booked 13 spots last year, and I was like, my jaw
I know your
dropped.
jaw just dropped. I was like, oh, I guess that's a lot.
That's incredible. So I just wanted you to share any information you may have. I'm going to ask you some questions, and yeah, I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself. Start there. How did you get into the business? All the things about commercials. So talk to
Okay,
me.
sounds good. So I moved to LA. I'm originally from Chicago. I moved to LA in 2015, and I actually came to LA with the intention of becoming an entertainment lawyer. So I went to law school, I did that whole spiel, graduated, moved here, and I was working at a law office for a while, and I just really hated it. I ended up like not wanting to do that anymore. But when I first moved to LA, I was in like a casting group on Facebook, and an agent found me there. It was Bella Agency at the time. And she was like, "Hey, have you ever considered print work or commercial work?" And I'm like, "You know what? I'm here. I might as well." I really enjoyed performing as a kid. It just never turned into anything. And yeah, I met with her. She signed me, and I had started off with print, and I wasn't really booking anything. And I was just like, I don't know if this is what I want to do. Like laughing at a salad, not my vibe. Like this is just not the
Right.
work I want to be doing. And then the agent who was handling commercials at Bella at the time, who was Taylor Trumbo, was like, "Hey, how would you feel about like acting? Like, would you be comfortable if I started submitting you for auditions?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, that sounds great." So we would be getting auditions, but I was unable to make them because I was working a 9 to 5. And that
Okay.
was during the time where they would give you a time to show up in person.
Yes.
And then you would show up in person and you were waiting for 2 hours. And you're
Oh,
like, my lunch is 1 hour. Like, I gotta go. So my mind wasn't in it completely. And I was more about financial stability in a 9 to 5.
totally get it.
That's where I was at. So nothing, I would book maybe one commercial a year. And that's kind of how it was from 2017 to 2020. Uh,
Okay.
we would get avails, like all of that stuff would happen, but nothing would like cement.
Okay.
And
Let me ask you really quick.
yeah.
So you kind of fell into it and you
Mhm.
didn't really study anything as far as you just fell
Yeah.
into it and like kind of started booking here-ish and here-ish and here and there. Okay.
Yeah, I never really took acting classes. I mean, I've talked to a couple of people who say law school is an acting class.
I agree. My
And
dad was a lawyer, so yes.
yeah, I mean, we do trial law, we do all of that when we're in school. So you do learn how to act, but it's not obviously what you would learn in an acting class. And then in 2020 is when I took, or was it 2019 was when I took my first improv class.
Okay.
Yeah, at UCB
Oh, cool.
before they closed the one on, I think that was
Yeah.
Sunset. That's the one.
Yeah.
Too. Yeah.
So did you take an improv class for commercials or just an improv class?
It was just Improv 101. My agent was like, "Hey, like just a suggestion, like what if we got you in an improv class just so that you like got a little loose and you just kind of got comfortable around people." And I was always also in like a weird mindset at the time where improv was just really helpful in getting me out of my own head.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I went into Improv 101. I made really great friends, but I also just kind of learned how to play a game with other people. And I
Got
think
it.
that's such a useful skill to have in commercial because you'll be in an audition room and they'll give you a redirect. And unless you really know what to do with that redirect, it's like kind of
Yeah.
hard to play with it. So yeah, that was my first class I took. And then I jumped into, right before the pandemic, I jumped into a scene study class
Okay.
at Anthony Mindel. So AMAW is kind of what they go as.
Okay.
and I was there for a little bit until the studio closed during the pandemic. So yeah, I didn't really take any classes from 2015 to 2019. It was just kind of.
And did you notice that taking that improv class and scene study was a game changer for you? Because I mean, there was a big shift as, from booking one job or two to
Yeah,
with,
it was definitely, it was I think out of all of the classes, scene study I feel like is very helpful for like TV and film,
yeah.
100%. I think improv specifically is great for commercials
Mhm.
because, like I said, either you're in the audition room, but once you book, you also have to be ready to play with a director. So
Yeah.
if I hadn't had that experience, I don't think I would be able to show up on set. And if someone gave me a note, I'd be like, okay, so what does that mean? What does that look like? Because I remember previously when I was on set, a director would give me a note and I was just like, I don't know what you're talking about, but like I think maybe I
Yeah.
can figure it out. And then I think what really changed for me was in 2020 during the pandemic. I think everyone went through this, but it was like, what do I really want to be doing with my life? um,
Yeah.
what I don't want to be doing anymore, which was a 9 to 5 office job. It just like killed my soul. And I emailed Taylor, my commercial agent, and I was like, okay, let's do this. Let's see what happens. It's got my undivided attention. So it was a complete mindset shift. And then 2021, I think, whenever they started opening up sets again to where you still had to get tested, I booked a Dos Equis commercial, a national. And then it was Dos Equis, it was Ford Bronco a few weeks later, and then it was Hennessy. And it was just like, it was almost like I did the training, but I also had like a shift in mindset.
Yes.
And I don't think if I would have had that shift in mindset, the training would have been irrelevant.
It's so interesting that you're saying that. And I literally wrote mindset shift in my
Yeah.
paper, and then you said it.
Yeah.
But I do think that a lot of times actors uh, are not fully committed. And I look at myself and my own progression or journey. And with commercials, I remember having a mindset of like, okay, I'm going to figure this out and I'm going to make a living doing commercials. And it was as if that was my goal and that's what I was going to do. And
Yeah.
that is what happened. And for film and TV, I had this idea that it had to be people that had studied for 4 years or had gone to Harvard or Tisch.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do that because I didn't go to a 4 year university and therefore never really created any traction.
Hmm.
Now I'm nibbling and kind of working in that field and like working towards it because now I'm like, I know I can fucking do this with my
Yeah.
eyes closed. But it's such a mindset shift that has to happen in order for there to be results.
Yeah. I had the same problem. I think for me, it started like, okay, so I made the decision I want to act, right? I've wanted to act since I was a kid. And then I think you associate acting with like these big like TV and film and like theater. So you kind of,
Dreams. The word dreams. Yeah.
yeah, you see like these big elaborate dreams and you're like, okay, like that's what I want, right? But then you don't realize that there's other steps that you can take that kind of like take you in that direction. And also I was hearing from people that I was in class, and I don't know if it was like out of jealousy or like what it was, but it was like commercials aren't real acting. And it's like
Totally.
you try going on set for several hours in a day and say the same line 30 times in different
Yeah.
ways. Tell me you're not going crazy. Like, it's a
Totally.
completely different game. I personally think commercials are a great way to prepare yourself for like bigger sets because you're just already used to getting client opinion, director opinion,
Yeah.
like the camera guy seeing something completely different, and you're just
All
like,
hands in the pot.
yeah,
Yes.
everyone's in it. So I think I had to get out of the mindset of like, okay, so commercials are something I'm really good at. So why don't I put all of my energy into that and see what happens? And yeah, I mean, it just progressively got bigger and bigger. And now I'm just kind of where I'm at.
Amazing. And talking about the difference between film and TV versus commercials, do you treat auditions differently or do you treat them the same?
I think what was originally happening with me in TV and film was I was transferring so all of my tapes, and I think casting directors in the commercial concept of it all have kind of gotten to know me. Like I love comedy. So all of my tapes are really fun. Like I'm not like this serious actor unless the note calls for a serious scene. You know, sometimes you get those. Um, but for the most part, I was transferring a lot of my comedy over to like some tapes and like that
Film and
just,
TV.
yeah, and that just
Okay.
doesn't transfer over, you know?
Okay.
And I ended up taking a on-camera technique class with Annie Grinley,
Mm.
and she does, you know, she does drama, she does comedy, so that helped ground my drama a lot more because what was happening is like not every tape has to be funny. Like I don't think that's what they want. Uh,
Yeah.
and as obviously that's something you kind of have to work on. I've obviously gotten better with tapes now, and I think it also has so much to do with who you're taping with.
Mhm.
I've got my set group of readers that I use
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
and that's been really helpful because we all really comfortable with each other now. So if something isn't playing right or like, no, that looks, I'll do that again. It's just a very honest conversation about where we're all at. But yeah, at first it was a struggle.
It sounds like you're very aware and decisive as to what you like and what you don't like and what you want to present, which
Mhm.
is something that a lot of actors don't have, especially newer actors. How did you get there?
Mhm.
Do you think you're a decisive person? Because the way you're speaking really sounds like you're very clear as to what you wanted to, like how you want to shape the, the thing that you're creating.
Yeah,
And I feel like not a lot of actors do that.
I am naturally a very analytical person.
Okay.
I think also my law background was really helpful in that because you break everything down to an extensive point. But if I'm being honest, therapy was huge for me. I've been seeing a therapist now for like the last 4 years with maybe like a little bit of a break in between. But
Mhm.
until you really get to know yourself and like what's going on in your brain, it's like really hard to convey that as a character. Um, because I think at the beginning you're like struggling and you're judging yourself and you're judging the character. And it makes it really hard for you to even play that character because you're like, okay, why can't I do it? And like,
Right.
is that even written that way? Like that doesn't make any sense. But yeah, I think therapy was a really big like self-awareness. This is what you do. Cause like I make a joke out of everything in life too, right? Like I try to like kind of like
Interesting.
make it okay. And I'm like, oh, I'm just joking. But I also do that in my work and don't take myself very seriously in my work. And I'm like, okay, that's a me thing. So I should probably work on that so that when I'm auditioning, it doesn't
Oh,
transfer over into my work.
wow, that's
Yeah.
so cool and so self-aware.
Yeah. So I think self-awareness as an actor is like really big. You kind of have to do that work.
Yeah. And what type of character, I think that most actors have 3 or 4 categories that they tend to go out for commercially. What are those for you?
For me, I always go out for like the quirky, fun office girl. Gosh, what's another one? I'm good at deadpan comedy, so like Audrey Plaza, like that kind of vibe. Girl Next Door. So all of these like very like overly friendly and like smiley, and she's just like, what was the other one? What is that one? It's like the like easygoing, like boho vibe,
Yeah.
just
Are you like that in real life?
I can be, but I think I'm a lot more serious in real
Oh,
life, which is really
yeah.
funny because then when I'm like, again, when I'm acting, I'm like overly excited, but like I'm more of an introvert in real life.
The reason that I'm asking is because I tend to go out for like mom and warm and all of, there's a certain type,
Yeah.
and I don't think I'm like that in my real life.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I go out for young mom too, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, yeah. That is so
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you think that has to do with your energy, the way you look?
I think it's a mix of both because I have headshots. Like I have one of my headshots where I'm like wearing like a polka dotted shirt and like it has like a fun collar on it and my hair's up in a ponytail and like I have my curtain bangs. So she just looks like friendly and
Yeah,
outgoing. And that's the one she uses, my agent uses the most. So I think headshot has a lot to do with it. It's like, oh yeah, she looks super fun and super easygoing, but it all goes back to like casting knows me now too. So they've interacted with me in person.
yeah.
So they like see a breakdown and they see my face. They're like, yeah, she can play that,
Right.
because they've seen my work. But yeah, I'm just overly energetic on camera.
Okay. And are most of your auditions right now, we're in the middle of 2024, do they tend to be more self-tapes or do they tend to be more in person?
Most of them are self-tapes. I know, for example, like Jody Sonnenberg, she'll start self-tape and then you're at 200 South for callbacks.
Yeah.
Same R&B casting, like all of their stuff is in person. Dan Bell, for the most part, is all in person. But most of the stuff that I do is self-tape.
Self-tape first call and callback, or first call self-tape and then in person?
Mostly self-tape, first call, and then tape and Zoom for second call callback too. So I'll be on Zoom for the
Oh,
callback too.
oh wow, at home.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So you literally like, I don't think you can see it, but I'm literally like in my bedroom. Like this is behind my bedroom door. And this is kind of where I do callbacks too.
Amazing. That's not the case for me. It's self-tape most of the time and then um in person for the second.
Are you at
So
200 South a lot?
yes, and R&B casting
I love
for
Ryan. Ryan's amazing.
amazing.
Amazing. He's such a sweet man.
Yeah, I mean, most people that have been in the business for a long time are really great and generous and kind and all the things.
Yeah. And very mindful of like what actors are going through, which is I think is also very helpful.
Yeah. Let's talk agents.
Okay.
How do you stay in contact with your agent? How do you have a good relationship with your agent? Is it more email, you booked, or is it a little friendlier? And if that's the case, how did you create that rapport?
Yeah. So me and Taylor for commercials have been together now for 7 years.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, she was the first one who was like, hey, how do you feel about me submitting you for commercials? And she was at Bella at the time. And then she was leaving and she was like, hey, just wanted to let you know I'm leaving the company and I'm forming my own agency. And I just thought that was really cool. So I was like, yay, female power. I love that. So I was like, take me with you. Like, please don't leave me. And so yeah, we just kind of built a friendship outside of all of it. And it was mostly like I would check in via email, like, what can I do differently? Especially when we would have a hold and I would get dropped. I was like,
Mhm.
what is it? Like, what's going on? And she was always very sweet. And she was like, sometimes it's just luck. Look,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
really don't know what to do with it. Um, and then obviously when you've been with each other for that long and you're kind of like doing that back and forth, you build a relationship. I think asking questions also kind of like to them is like, oh, okay, she's actually cares and
yeah.
she needs to know what she can do differently. I think a lot of people tend to just like want to blame the agent for
Yep.
not having any results. And it's like, it's a two-way street. Like they get you the audition, but like your job is the audition.
Yes.
So what can you do differently to help them get you more stuff?
And sometimes I think they think actors think asking a question is bothering them or things like
Yeah,
that. It's not,
yeah.
especially if it's a genuine question that you want to find the answer to.
Right. Yeah. And I would always, I always had questions, like even like when it was time to get new headshots, it was like, what are we looking for? Like, what do you need me to get? Like, look
So that
wise.
was a collaborative experience.
Yeah. And she would send me, I mean, she would go as far as to send me, even to this day, like she'll send me a mood board off Pinterest of like things
Wow.
she put together. And she's just like, I think this is kind of what we need. Like, can you get that for me? And also like don't make it all about work, maybe. Like
Yeah,
maybe occasionally be like, hey, how's life going? Or like if you know they have a kid, like how is your kid doing in like ballet or anything like that? I
yeah,
mean, you have to keep in mind that like these people also have lives,
are human.
are human, like outside of like submitting you for a bunch of work. So I think that goes a lot into building a relationship with them. And I think the
Yeah,
more you build that relationship with them, the more they care about getting you work too. It's like a two-way street.
got
Um,
it.
and definitely don't be scared to ask questions. I think that's a big thing.
And what about casting directors? Do you have relationships with casting? Like you said that a lot of them you've interacted with. How have you done that?
So I need to get back on it because I used to do this all the time. But last year and the year before that, I used to send handwritten thank you notes
Wow.
after we would book. So obviously the
I'm so bad at that.
yeah, I'm so bad. I was getting really good. I actually learned that from one of my friends. She was like, I send a thank you note to like produced, like if I can do the production company, I do that. And then I send one to casting too. So I did that for a while and the pandemic happened and like everyone went virtual. So I started to send like emails with like a funny like e-card or something. And I was like, hey, thank you so much for having me, for booking me on Lowe's or anything like that. And most of the time they respond. I mean, they're very responsive and they're really happy that you thank them because I think a
Yeah,
lot of people forget about them
yeah,
once you book the job. And then, yeah, if you're in person with them and they're trying to have a conversation with you, try to have that conversation with them because they'll remember that you guys talked about your dog or
yeah,
something.
totally.
Yeah. Yeah, with Jody, like Jody Sonnenberg has seen me so many times now via tape that she knows me as a person now. And when I do see her at 200 South, like even if I'm not auditioning for her, like I'll go say hi.
Yeah.
Like don't be afraid to say hi to people.
Um, and I know that, like you said, a lot of these callbacks now are via Zoom.
Mhm,
Um, I know for me, I was in the room in the last job that I booked. I was in the room and it was just the session runner because nobody's actually in the room.
mhm.
Uh, and it was a comedic spot, but it's quiet in there because everybody's muted.
Yeah.
When I was in the fitting, one of the agency people came up to me. They're like, "Oh my gosh, that was so funny." She gave me a high five.
Yeah.
You don't get that feedback
Yeah.
now that they're via Zoom muted.
Right.
You deal with that? Is that something that kind of throws you off a little bit? How do you deal with either being in the room and then being on Zoom, or you being in your own room and then being via Zoom? Is there any tips or things that you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like I always introduce myself, even if the session runner introduces me, like, because sometimes they'll be like, this is Jude Salazar, like right at the beginning. So like I introduce myself and I'm like, hi everyone, I'm Jude. And then, the director will pop up and you obviously can see their name like right at the
Yeah,
bottom of the screen. So I read it and I like acknowledge him by name.
totally.
Yeah, like acknowledge him by name. And then if anyone comes on screen because they have like a note or something, again, read their name and be like, oh, okay, thank you so much for that feedback. I mean,
People love to hear their own names. That's just it's
they
like
love it.
psychology 101.
Yeah.
I used to do that. I would ask the person that would be outside the room
Yeah.
whenever we would be in the room audition. And it was like, I don't know, I was like, oh, who's the director? Oh,
Hmm.
David. And so whenever we would talk or whatever, I'd be like, okay, David, what did you think about? And all of a sudden they get perked up because
Yeah.
one, they're surprised that their name's being said and that
Yeah.
you even know their name.
Yeah. So like even for an example, like I booked Lowe's this year and I didn't know this obviously until the callback because that's when the directors on Zoom, like everyone's at Zoom. This was at R&B casting. So
Mhm.
Henry is always doing those sessions, who is the cat who is the session runner. And then the director comes on and I kind of recognized his voice. I was just like, that voice sounds familiar. And then he says his name, and I was like, oh my God, hi, Neil. Like, I was like, I worked with you on Mountain Dew. He was a director for the Mountain Dew commercial. And as soon as that happened, it was like, oh, she remembered that we did Mountain Dew. And I was like, I will never forget Mountain Dew because that was like the first time everyone gave me lines. And I was like, I will never forget this job. Um, and then, yeah, I ended up booking it. And I think it had to do with establishing that relationship. And I'm sure everybody did something in that room that worked, but like for some reason it was just like, oh, she remembers and she takes note of that. And I think that really does help.
I auditioned for that. I
Yeah,
didn't get a call back for it. Um,
everyone auditioned for that. There was so many people in the room for that.
I found the lines to be so difficult. It felt so salesy.
Yeah.
And I was, I don't know, that day. I have shitty auditions sometimes, you know what I mean? And that
I do
was one
too.
of them where I walked out and I was like, yeah, not getting a call back for that. That wasn't fun. So I'm
Well,
sure.
what's funny is like, sometimes like it happens to me all the time where I'll leave a call back and I'll even text Taylor, my agent, I'll be like, that's not happening. Like, it's not, let's let it go. And then she'll email me like the next day and she'll be like, you have an avail. And I'm just like, oh my God. Like, so I leave the room all the time where I'm like, oh, he hated me. It's like, I don't think that's gonna work. But yeah, even for that one, we were on set, right? And he loves doing that where he'll give you like new lines, like right in front of camera. And it's different. It's way more difficult when you just went from learning lines on the spot in English. And then they're like, okay, let's do it in Spanish now. And you're like,
And then they go, period. They don't even tell you what the lines are. They're just
yeah.
like, yep,
It's like, and the added thing to that was like, we have to shoot this particular line that you're about to put in your brain within a 7-second time frame.
yep,
So we'd do it again and we'd do it again. And then he'd have like a timer on and be like, okay, we're at 7.8. We needed the 7.1. And I'm like, okay, you're just like sweating by the time you're done. So
yeah.
yeah, it's all stuff that you kind of have to be prepared for.
I think that's something that actors forget is a lot to me at the audition. It's like it's this expanded version of the spot, and then
Mhm.
they have to compress it all either to that 15-second or that 30-second, and that includes the logo at the end, all of the things. um so a lot of times, from what I've seen of the spots that I've either done or auditioned for, it ends up being a watered down or like a more compressed version of what you did in the room. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of the times actors will look at the end result and go, oh, that was just a portion of the line, or that was just a look.
Mhm.
And they think, oh, what did that person do to book it? Like that ended up being nothing. And
Yeah.
you have to do all these other things in the room in order to just go into the actual spot and then just do a look and say, ha, that was funny. Cut.
Yeah.
And
It's completely different. I think that has a lot to do with like once they audition you and once they call you back, they're like, that might not work, time wise, so that by the time you get to set, you're like, they completely change the spot. So
Mhm.
what I've started to do for that to prevent like also like a little bit of a shock to your system, I'll ask for scripts beforehand. Like if production's obviously already reaching out to you, I'd be like, hey, is there any changes to script?
Right.
Or any changes to the spot, just so that I'm like aware going in and you're not in makeup, like freaking out. You're like, oh, I have to learn a whole new thing.
Yeah, a lot of times they have so many things going on that they forget, oh, we created a new script, like let's give it to the actor.
Yeah,
They
who needs to
they
do it?
Yes. they're just worried about, okay, now we finalized it. Great. I need to take care of the other 20 things on my list. They
Yeah.
forgot to give it to the actor.
Yeah. And then you're like, that's
Yeah,
news to me. It's like, I'm just,
totally.
I think there's also important to like, when you mention the watered down version, you have to keep in mind that sometimes they look at the 30-second spot and they're like, oh, we could actually turn this one into like a 15 too. So like,
Mm-hmm.
how can you have to keep in mind that as an actor, you also have to like maybe be looking at a 15-second spot. So they need you to convey that message within 15 seconds. And that's really hard to do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Um, so another thing that I see a lot of actors struggle with is instructions for self-tape.
Mhm.
Uh, most of the time here at Line Runners, when people come in to like coach or whatever, they'll say the instructions say stick to the lines, and then they'll do a second version and improv it,
Mhm.
or they'll go one, throw it away, and one a little bit bigger.
I hate the throw it aways. I'm just like, what does that mean?
So exactly, let's
Yeah.
talk about that.
Yeah.
As far as, do you stick to the lines? What do you do with those very general instructions that we get all
Yeah.
the
Yeah. So sometimes I obviously like read the directions first, but I'll do line is scripted 100% because I have to keep in mind that someone already wrote copy
time?
and they want to see if the copy is going to work day of. So I always give them what they want first. And
Great.
the second one, I think of it as like, okay, if I was in this real situation, right? Like, say this was a real life situation, would I be having like a conversation with the person? And what kind of conversation would that be like? So the second take to me is always more like, oh, this is how I would joke around with a friend if I was in this situation. And that's kind of how the improv comes out. Because it's like, what if I was talking to Natasha and we were
Mhm.
talking about this one thing? Like, what would that look like? And that ends up being the second take that I send because I picture a friend on the other side. And then obviously depending on the mood of the commercial, it's like, okay, like who would it be better if you pictured like your mom on the other side or like a brother? Like how would that conversation change if you change the person in front of you? And I think that helps the take a lot. You're like, okay, that works.
Dude, it's so crazy how the language or that you're using is so close to like what I teach in
Yeah,
the Crystal Blueprint.
yeah.
Always one of the techniques that I teach in the blueprint, or one of the processes, is like change the person that you're speaking to, because it's going to change how you say the line.
And it
And by the
changes
way,
your tone in your voice too.
right? Even if it's two different friends, because we relate to people differently, right? Like if you're talking to Natasha, it's still different than how you speak to your agent, even though they're both your friends, because you have
Right,
different relationships to both of them,
right.
and talking to your mom. So it's so interesting that you do that so organically
Yeah.
already.
Yeah. I think it was helpful for me because you notice that a lot when you're like taking classes too. I think your tone changes depending on who you're talking to. I've started to do like, for example, if I have to have a line reader for commercials, like for Bombay Sapphire, I was like, okay, so this is obviously like a really fun like spot. Like, who do I have who like is reader for me that is going to have fun with me on the other end of the camera and can also improv with me and it's not going to be like stressful trying to like go back and forth with each other. And I was like, oh, Natasha.
Yeah.
But if I have a more like toned down serious tape, say for like example in TV or film, I know to call my friend Ryan because the tone between us is different and I know he's more on the serious side.
Oh,
So
wow.
it'll make me more serious. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah, so I keep in mind like if you use your friends because you're not able to get to the studio, for example, like think of what friends bring that out in you because
Yes.
you'll see it in the tape. that's just kind of a trick of mine.
Love it. Well,
Yeah.
talking about Bombay Sapphire, you booked that job.
Thank
Congratulations.
you.
This was a spot that I helped a lot of actors with.
Mhm.
A lot of actors auditioned for it. It's shot in Barcelona, which I was seeing your stories and I was like, this
It was amazing. It was an amazing experience. Yeah.
is so awesome. And you're gonna share the tape with us.
Yeah.
I'm going to like screen share it. And one of the things that I noticed was that you did 3 different takes. Did they ask for 3 takes?
They did ask for 3 takes.
Okay.
It was in the breakdown. Not in the breakdown, but you know how they send you the instructions.
Yeah.
They say to send 3 distinct takes, and that's
Which is
something.
wild because it was already a pretty long script.
Yeah. So like you'll hear it, like that's a good example. Like my friend Natasha is the one doing the line reading because I was like, okay, this is a fun spot. But also she had gotten the audition too. So we're like,
Yeah.
okay, let's just both get it out of the way. Um,
Yeah.
but it helps to like tape with a friend who's like willing to play with you, but also give you helpful notes of like, okay, maybe like you go back and forth with them and you're like, what if I was like a little more skeptical in this one? And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
it's a stranger giving me a drink. Like, I don't know how I would feel about that as a woman at a bar. So like, how am I going to convey that and still be funny? And then she's like, oh, I love that. Okay, let's do that one.
Great.
And then you kind of play off that person.
That's the other thing that I was gonna bring up
Yeah.
was your 3 takes are all different. And they're all very specific circumstances, which is something that I drill into the commercial blueprint actors
Yeah.
because another mistake that I see a lot of actors make is they will do 2 takes and one is bigger and one smaller, but they're the same takes.
Hmm.
You know, you guys are going to see how different all of them are and how your feeling for everything who you're speaking to is so different in all 3 of them. So of course, that's going to set you apart automatically when you turn in a takes with 3 very distinct takes.
Yeah, because then to that, I feel like to the people run, so like director, like producer, like agency, they're like, oh, okay, if we get her on set,
She can play.
she can play. Let's do it, you know?
I think a lot of people are just so focused on like booking it as opposed to showing, oh, I can do a bunch of stuff, whatever you guys throw at me, because a lot of times they're still kind of figuring it out.
Yeah.
They want to feel confident that an actor can take on whatever it is that they need.
Yeah, because a good example, and you'll see it in the second take. Like in the second take, once we were shooting the spot, the director comes up to me. He's like, I love that second take that you did in the tape. Let's do that version because that's not something agency's seen yet. It didn't end up working out because that's not the tone they were going for, but they were all cracking up because it's like no one had given them that. It was all just like an overly like, oh, it's a alcohol commercial. We're obviously trying to be salesy. And it's like, I don't think that's the vibe they were going for.
Yeah,
But
totally. Okay, so if you don't mind, I would love to play it. I'm gonna stop after each one and sort of like talk a little bit about what you were thinking for each of them.
okay.
And then I would love to just get a little bit more insight about the callback at the end
Okay.
and shoot, because it sounded like it was really fun.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Cool. Let's see, let's do desktop. Or let's do that. Share. Okay. Okay. Here we go. Well, that's gonna get stuck. I already see it in the thing. Let's make sure. Here we go.
Bread is so close I can almost taste it.
Tell me about it.
What if you could? Here. It's bright, sparkling lemon burst of flavor that's basically Friday in a glass.
Ooh.
Wait, like Friday? Like the feeling of the weekend ahead whispering, hey, join me.
That sounds like my kind of place.
Well, then cheers. to the best day of the week.
I'm so calling off tomorrow. Thank you.
Fred,
All right. I don't know if you can, okay, so let's
Yeah.
go here. Talk to me about that one.
So that one was, I think I distinctly remember them in the first, because they obviously ask you what they want at first, right? So I think I remember them distinctly being like, she's obviously, they're over being at the office, like.
That's why you gave him that moment before and all
Right.
of that, like, oh, going to work.
Right. And that was like a back and forth that I had with Natasha, right? Where I was like, okay, what would she be doing? And we kind of like brainstormed off each other. And I'm like, oh, I know. Like, just like if you were in an elevator with someone and you're kind of not in the conversation, but you're in the conversation, you'd be like kind of fiddling with your nails or your keys or something would be in your hand. And then you're bored because you don't want to be at the office. And then this person magically appears promising you a good time. So that kind of snaps you out of it. And you're like, okay, I like this person, but I also like the idea of being on a beach somewhere. So like, what does that look like? And that's why, like, you know, when they tell you in the prompt, it's like, then the elevator's open and you're like in this amazing, like bar top roof. And I'm like, okay, so like, what would my eyes do if that was something that happened? So if like elevator doors open and you see like a bar, like your eyes are obviously going to widen and you're going to be like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then, yeah, I always like, unless, I guess I kind of play with it, but like, I always try to button my scenes sometimes because they're going to see so many tapes that like I don't do it at the front usually the front is always like an action of some sort. And then that's my button. It's like an action button. And then the end is usually like a little button that you're like acknowledging like the main person in the scene, if that makes sense.
So you tend to do a non-speaking moment before a
Mhm.
physicality, and then you button it with something verbal at the end.
Right. Unless sometimes they'll tell you don't button, don't do
Yeah.
anything. Like if they tell you they're not interested in improv or anything like that,
You just,
don't do it. But it was clear from them. It was like they didn't know what the vibe was going to be yet. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, this one's one
Yeah.
that you like
there
button.
were a lot of alternative lines,
Right.
you know.
Right.
Okay.
So I was like, so if I see alt lines, I'm like, okay, this is one you can probably button and they won't get upset that you didn't listen to like an instruction.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's go with the second one.
so close I can almost taste it.
Mm.
Wait, what if you could? Try this, a sparkling bright lemon burst of flavor that takes your taste buds to Friday.
I don't take drinks from strangers.
Wait, but maybe like Friday? Yeah, like the feeling of the weekend ahead is whispering, hey, join me.
Okay, I'll bite. Take me there now.
Okay, go ahead. Take your taste buds to the best day of the week.
I've never liked a stranger more. Good day.
Great. Talk to me about that one.
That one was my favorite. Yeah, that was more of like, I just had the thought of like, how would you react to someone who just pops out of nowhere in the
Enough.
elevator? And you're a woman, right? We're like obviously always scared of strangers because that's just in our DNA. But I was like, how would you react to that? You'd think they're bullshitting you. So how do you play that without being like overly mean? So I was like, let's just make her sassy.
Great.
So that's what I wanted to convey. And obviously toward the end, you're still not buying it. And the buying moment is when the elevator opens and you're like, okay, I still don't like you, but like, I trust you now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think something that you did really effectively in there is have that sassiness in a commercial tone,
They're
which
very
needs-
different.
yeah,
Yeah.
because they're sassy, like probably real Jude sassy, and you know that can come off differently. You gotta, you know, it's like if I always use the example of a spot that I did where like a dog, I've been working on a lasagna all day, the dog comes in, the lasagna falls, and there's a lasagna all over the place. In
Mhm.
real life, that Kaz would be fucking different, right?
Exactly.
but in the commercial, it's like, we're ordering pizza, right? Like,
Yeah.
right? So that was really great how you kept it within the tone. And
Yeah.
you said they try to do it on set, this particular one?
They were like, the director came up to me. We were already in the elevator, which obviously they built for the set. And he was like, really love that second take that you did in your tape.
Mhm.
Can we try that and see if client bites on it or likes it? And I was like, yeah, sure. So I obviously was like, okay, second take. I was sassy in my second take. So let's
Yeah.
just recreate that here. And we didn't go past the second time on that. They were like, no, we don't like that. But yeah, you have to keep in mind that like, regardless of what they're saying, like keep it grounded or like all of that, it's like, they still want you to border on like smiley sassy. So
Yes, yes.
you're not like if someone in a stranger in an elevator came up to me and tried to give me a drink, I'd be like, no, dude, like
Not happening.
not happening. And I'd be really rude. But obviously in commercial world, it's like, oh, okay. Like, you're kind of like on the funnier side of all of it. But yeah, I think for commercial, you always want to keep in mind client prefers smiley over literally everything else.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. And it's interesting because like one of the things that I really focus on is script analysis and from the product people point of view. And I love that take. I think it's like a fun, like, oh, it perks you up.
Hmm.
I understand from the product people why they wouldn't want it because at the end of the day, they're selling
Right.
this alcohol, right?
Right.
And they want somebody to really kind of buy in, even though
Right.
they're bored. And
Yeah.
that's probably from the product people why they were like, no, but the director's like, that's so interesting.
Yeah. So like from product, I mean, it makes sense, right? Like you don't want someone to watch the commercial and be like, she was hesitant to even take it. So like, why would
Totally.
I? Like,
Right. Right.
yeah. So I understand it, but it was like at the moment they're asking you for two different takes. So like give them
Totally.
two different takes.
And how can you give them something that is interesting and that will create, it's still within the world, right?
Right.
You did a commercial tone, she bought in at the end in a sassy way, all of the things like you were effective in the way you executed, right?
Mhm.
And again, it's not, I call it like, it's not right in the middle, it's like a little bit off and that kind of makes you be like, oh,
Yeah.
and part of our jobs to the self-tape to get us into that callback because you're like, what else can this actor do?
Right. Because you also have to keep in mind, like everyone is going to do the same exact take.
Yes.
And I know it's really hard in the moment to like even think of anything original because you're also
Yeah.
trying to like meet a deadline.
Yeah.
But like really, like I think my best note is like have fun with it.
Yeah.
Like put yourself in that situation and like what would that look like?
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go with the third one. Let's see what you do. So the first one, you started with the
With the nail.
hand, right? Like
Yeah.
looking at nails first, looking down at the floor. Now
Yeah.
you're starting with a new moment before. Yes,
Right.
I love all of this. All of this makes sense why you booked this. Like, sorry, but yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Friday's so close I can almost taste it.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, what if you could? Try this. A sparkling, bright lemon burst of flavor that takes your taste buds to Friday.
I just want to make a note. I love how you bought in different places.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times people do a different physicality and they think that they've like done it all, but then they have the same arc,
Mm-hmm.
say the lines the same way. So
Same
you've changed the moment before, moment
Yeah.
after, but the meat is the same turkey and bologna and the whatever. You really change when you bought in all three of them, which I think is really interesting as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Wait, like Friday? Like the feeling of the weekend is ahead whispering, hey, join me.
I want to go there.
Go ahead. Take your taste buds to the best day of the
And again, how you see it, also different. Like
Yeah.
you literally created different moments for every single beat, which is literally what I tell actors to do. And I'm so I just love that you're doing it, right? And you haven't taken the commercial blueprint, but you do it organically. And however people get to this is what I want them to do because it's going to help them book and increase their booking ratios, period.
Agreed.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jude Salazar.
Yep. All right. Talk to me about the callback and and I'm keeping you longer than I'm
You're
supposed to.
fine.
I'm gonna tell me about the callback and then tell me about the shoot.
So that callback was virtual,
Okay.
which is crazy because it's so extensive. So I really thought that was going to be in person. But the callback was virtual, and I was just they put you side to side with the person who you're
Which
doing.
is so hard.
So hard because I'm like, I don't know whether to look at Dude here or like myself or the camera or like what do I do? So I've learned to just, unless I'll ask beforehand before we
Yeah.
start taping, I'm like, hey guys, just so that it looks right on your end, like where do you want my eye line? Like, am I looking at myself? Am I looking at camera? And sometimes they'll test it on you. Like if you ask them that, they'll be like, okay, try him, try you, try camera. And that's when they'll be like, okay, stay on him because it reads better for them on the other end.
Great.
So I did that, and we just kind of improv'd. Like the first scene was very much how it was written, and then the two scenes were, off book, like do whatever you want. And I was just kind of going off of whatever he was giving me. And then it wasn't until the end that it was so funny because the director was like, hey Jude, like so nice to see you again. And I was like, who is this person? Because I wasn't seeing his face. He was staying off camera. And it wasn't until I literally booked the job and was in Spain. And I was like, oh, I was like, you and I did Blue Moon together.
Wow.
Like, oh, got it. Yeah, and he's like, what helped us was we wanted to see if you could play, because in Blue Moon, I was completely nonverbal.
Mhm.
It was all just like based on emotion and like what my eyes were doing. He's like, we wanted to see if you could add dialogue to all of it and still play. And he was like, and once we saw that, we're like, well, we already know what she can do with just like looking at things. He was like, so it was just kind of like a book her. And I was like, okay, cool. I was just like, oh my God, because I was just mind blown. I was just like, who is this person? I've been on so many sets in like the last couple of months where I was like, I don't remember him and I feel so
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
But he was like, yeah, we did Blue Moon, and Blue Moon was an overnight shoot. So I showed up to set at 12 a.m.
Wow.
It was wrapped at 4, and I didn't really get to know the director. So it really is like a testament of like, be very aware of like what you're doing on set, even if you're on set for a very short amount of time, because they remember you 100%.
Better about like also remembering directors' names.
I'm horrible at it. I could be on set with him for like 12 hours, and by the end of the day, I'm like, what's his name? It's like, I don't remember.
They call a lot of people back for that.
They did. They called a lot of people back. I was in the waiting room with like 9 or 10 people of just my role. And I know every other role had like 9 or 10 people.
Oh, wow.
So it
And,
wasn't like a set,
and did you do it a bunch of times in the Zoom room? They kind of played with you?
Yeah, we did it like 4 or 5 times.
Okay.
And
did
they
you
like,
feel awesome after, or were you like,
no, I mean, I actually had an even bigger callback like right after. So like I didn't even care. I was just like, whatever, I'm gonna show up, I'm gonna have a good time. I'm already super anxious for the callback I have after. So like maybe this will help like ground me a little bit.
totally,
Yeah, so
totally.
like, okay, maybe this will help. So I left that and I was like, okay, thank you so much. I gotta go. I have to hop onto this other one. And yeah, like I think Natasha was here when I got the email, but I had gotten availed like I think the day after because they did have to go through a lot of people.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, we got the email and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to Barcelona. That is
That is
insane.
so fun. I love to travel for work. I
Yeah.
just to New York for a job, and it was like such a reminder of like how much I love to travel for work.
I know. I was like, yeah, I mean, I can travel on other people's dimes. It's like I'm totally
So fun.
yeah.
And tell me a little bit about being on set, the other actors. Did you guys improv? All the things. Did you actually book with the guy who you read? No. Okay.
No, completely different person. And I know the way the script was written, it sounds like my role was one of like 3 leads. But like once we got to set, I didn't have any dialogue. Like they added it on like maybe as like an edit. But there was obviously the spokesperson who was like the main person. And then there was the guy who was like my coworker slash friend.
Well, gets offered the drink, and I think
Right.
he's more like the person, right?
Right, he's more the person. So I had to get to set and like, no, you don't really have lines anymore. It's more of just based on your reaction to him and based on your reaction to her, and then maybe we'll play with some dialogue. But yeah, they completely changed it.
Okay,
The
you have to go and like do reactions, and then you're like,
I'm like, okay, I'm good. It's like, this is great. I got to Barcelona. Yeah, and then I mean, the poor girl, I felt so bad for her because obviously it's Bombay Sapphire, so they were trying to like fit a very specific vibe for her. And we were in the fitting for like 8 hours because they couldn't figure out what dress to put her in that would match Bombay. And she was actually really nervous on set because I had like a conversation with her. It was like her first time like in a lead role on a spot.
oh,
You could tell she was like really anxious. And I was like, dude, you're good. Like at the end of takes, we were both like, you got this, like you're good. And then yeah, I talked to both of them and they were just like, yeah, this is like the first, second spot I booked this year. And I was like, that's awesome, you guys.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to be like you never know. There was a spot that I went in for, and I was the hero, and I heard a lot of like rumblings, and then I was like, what's going on? And they put makeup on me, and then the lady told me, she's like, oh, we're trying to make you look older. And with the rumblings, like they closed the door, and I was like, am I about to lose this job in
Oh,
the and then they got me, they brought me back in, and I'm like, okay, like, and they were like, oh, now you're going to be the pharmacist. And the pharmacist that had fitted in the morning
hmm.
then got unbooked.
Oh, okay.
And then they booked, like they did a little bit more casting, and they booked somebody else as the hero, which is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually, this was my first time. It happened in December. I booked my dream client. Like I booked, I obviously can talk about it now because it's all out, but I booked Apple. It was a
Oh,
9 job. Booked them. It was for their like the new VR sets that they're coming out with. And super excited, right? I was like, oh my God, Apple, like dream client. And then they found a spot I had done for Samsung on the internet. And this particular commercial wasn't even supposed to be online anymore. Like it was supposed to be off. Like they hadn't bought me out for another year. And they ended up dropping me. It was when I tell you I cried. I was like, oh my God, not Apple. But I guess I like share that to be like, it happens. It was like the first time it happened to me. And it couldn't have been like a worse client to happen with because I was like,
yeah,
oh,
because you're like, yeah.
it was like a dream client. I've had it on like a vision board. And then yeah, there is some companies who like straight up do not want you if you've been in competitive pieces. So lately I've been more mindful too of like what I share on social media. So like if I'm like, for example, auditioning for an alcohol brand and there isn't like a conflict or exclusivity, I'll like remove it from my profile because I'm like, I don't,
Smart.
they might go on my Instagram and if
Oh,
they see a commercial from Dos Equis, they might not want me. Like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And I get it from their point of view, but
I was like, no. But it does happen. And that's just to like say like there is setbacks even in commercial world that you have to be prepared for. And like there will be another job. Cause like right after that, I think is when I booked Lowe's. And I was like, okay, we're okay. This is
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you always have to trust that there's a reason why that happened. And like I was on a veil for something before this last job. And yeah, I wish I would have booked both of them. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
I also think like, who knows if this other actor was their first spot, needed it for whatever reason more than I do. And you just gotta trust that there's a reason for everything.
Yeah, I guess another note I have too is like for in-persons, because Dan Bell does all their stuff in person for the most part. Like for that Apple spot specifically, like I showed up, I was playing the daughter, and there was a father obviously in the spot. I ended up auditioning with 6 different dads right on the spot. Like they were just having me wait outside and they're like, okay, let's try her with that. And then I caught on to the fact the director had like an accent to him and he said something to someone. And I'm like, oh, he's Argentinian. So like if I speak Spanish out of nowhere, like that might kind of click in their brain where they're like, oh, we might be able to do this in Spanish. And we can book her for both.
Dude, you're so smart. I just love it also something that again is like making me feel like we're marrying each other is like you are approaching commercials from the point of view of like psychology.
There's a psychology to advertising. Like 100%, like marketing, like everything, like there is a
And human
psychology aspect.
behavior, like you're like, oh yeah, they may want it in Spanish. I just want them to know that I speak it, right?
How can you plug in the fact that you can maybe make them more money? Like, how is that possible? And then, yeah, after I did the Spanish take, he responded to me in Spanish and he was like, eso estuvo precioso. And I was like, yes, got it. It's just like,
Oh, Messi, what?
got it. I was like, I think I booked it, guys. And then yeah, but I ended up having because they kept wanting to keep me, and I was like, guys, I gotta go. Like, been here for an hour. There's only
Yeah.
so many ways I can also keep playing
And yes,
with
that's very smart of
different,
you to be like, look, I don't want to
yeah,
like unbook myself in the room by just being like, oh, she
right. And
give it
there was
all.
there was only so many conversations. I would have conversations with the dads too, or like the people that I was auditioning, so that I was able to plug in part of that conversation into our audition in the room. And that would establish in the room, like, oh, how did they just build a relationship in like 2 seconds? I'm like, I've been talking to him outside for like 5 minutes. So yeah, talk to your partners if you get teamed up. Sometimes, unfortunately, like I've gotten teamed up with just duds. I'm
Yeah.
just like, you're in the room and you already
What do
know.
you do with that?
I honestly, I kind of just like I try to do my best, but I leave the room knowing that probably didn't happen. Like you're not gonna book that one. Just
Yeah.
like
And it happens.
it's happened to me so many times now where they partner me up with someone and I don't get it. And I'm just like, okay, I
Yeah.
really wish there was a way to like get partnered up with the right people. But like sometimes it's just not going to happen and that's just not your job. Like
Yeah.
it is what it is.
I call it like there's times you're just gonna drive to Santa Monica for no reason. Like that's just what happens sometimes.
I haven't been to that office in forever, thank
Yeah,
God.
that's back in the days when I would have to drive there on
Was it the
Friday.
Ocean one? The Ocean Avenue one?
Yeah, and it would be like 3 o'clock, they would call me in and I'm like, awesome. And then it would be with, I don't know, sometimes it'd be a kid who, is new and
Yeah.
they're supposed to be super excited and they're just like staring into space. And I'm like, I drove to Santa Monica for nothing, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes.
That's me sometimes when like Southpaw calls you in. I'm like, they'll be like 5:30 on a Friday. I'm like, you want me to go from the west side to the what at 5:30 in the afternoon? But yeah, that is really just how it is sometimes, and you can't do anything about it. Yeah, actors, we're crazy.
Thank you so much for your time. I know we went over, but
Oh no, you're
you
fine.
gave so much insight. I'm so excited for
Yeah,
everything.
I mean, good luck with the class. Obviously, if anyone ever has any questions, super available on social. Like people can ask me whatever they want.
What's your social?
It is Jude Salazar _. So my name and then an underscore at the end.
Cool.
Yay!
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Cass.
All right, Mama. Cheers.
Cheers.